Now it is my privilege and honor to invite on stage President and CEO of Hawaii Tourism Authority, our fearless leader of what it means to malama I ku'uhome, taking care of our island home, Mr. John DeFries.
Did I hear Jay take credit for resident sentiments? Huh? Now I got the mic. Let me just recap. It's been a long day, and give me about 10 minutes, and we can move out and enjoy ourselves and continue to enjoy each other's company. Back in January of 2020, if I can change this. What's that? Oh. Back in January of 2020, when the HTA Board of Directors adopted a strategic plan that identified these 4 pillars, at the time when I saw it personally, I thought this was incredible that blinders had come off, that the industry leaders were now looking at a more holistic approach to moving forward in the future. And the more I started to learn about destination management action plans and giving voice to community, all of that just seemed to line up extremely well. And in the course of talking to the community, it became common that across the state, this idea of regenerative tourism, that sustaining what we have only was no longer adequate, that we needed to look at the future in a different way. And so we started off with this very fundamental definition of regenerative tourism. The plan was adopted in January of 2020. In June of 2020, the board went a step further and responded to a call by a group called Aina Aloha Economic Futures that adopted a declaration, and the board unanimously adopted this declaration that basically establishes these principles, and these principles are intended to calibrate Hawaii's course, not only to recovery, but to rediscover our potential and our greatness, okay? And then today at lunch, you heard from Coach Sheldon here, who I take very seriously. I mean, her background, her insights, and the recognition she receives worldwide is a true gift. And these are quotes from Pauline that we didn't get into today, but which we need to take to heart. That civilization is being threatened in ways it never has before, presenting new realities, new norms, and new shocks. And tourism is intimately connected to these changes. And she likens this to the maturation of our industry. The years of tourism's exuberant youth, often involving overconsumption and little care for consequences, are coming to an end. And that this transition will not be easy, but it is necessary. And it requires a fundamental change in values. And that's what's so relevant about the Aina Aloha Economic Futures Declaration. That's what's so relevant about why an integrated strategic plan with 4 pillars is so important at this time. But I want to overlay a Hawaiian frame of mind, a paradigm, if you will, not uncommon throughout Polynesia. And it's the context of 7 generations, okay? Planning for 7 generations. As most of you know, I was born and raised in Waikiki, and this shot could have been taken early this morning from probably the 20th floor of the Sheraton Waikiki. When I was a kid, 5 years old, this is what Waikiki looked like, okay? Here it is this morning. And you see the bay of hotels along the shoreline. And here it is back in 1956, okay? But if you even go back further, and one of the things that's relevant about this image for me personally is I realized that in my own growth professionally, I had grown away in tourism from the things I had learned as a kid. And what I learned as a kid was that Waikiki Beach, for my family, for more than 100 years before I was born, was a source of food. We fished it every week, okay? A source of food, and then the elders in the family knew how to take certain types of seaweed and sea urchin and come up with medicinal applications. So it was a source of medicine. Food, medicine, and recreation was number 3, okay? And in the development of Waikiki, we inverted that hierarchy, and recreation became so important. And then we go through a pandemic, and we begin to realize that food supply is really important, right? So as we move forward to a regenerative future, some of these principles of the past have to be integrated. We have to listen, we have to pay attention, we have to revisit. So in this context of 7 generations, I want you to look at that center circle, and I want to tell you a story. So that center circle is me. The one on the far left is my great-grandfather, right? 3 generations before me. To my left, my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents. So my great-grandfather, who I did not know, but was talked about by the elders in my family. That generation would have seen the first vertical structures coming out of Waikiki, coming out of the beach, okay? And back then, he started expressing a concern that the hotels were being built too close to the ocean. And that concern stemmed from the fact that because they fished those waters all the time, they understood the tidal patterns, right? But they also understood where Waikiki got its name, bubbling, spouting fresh water, a reference to the subterranean flow of fresh water coming out of Manoa, Palolo, and Makiki, and entering Waikiki, the shoreline. And they knew that because certain type of seaweed, certain type of limu grew where the fresh water would come out, which would then attract certain types of fish, okay? So they had this understanding, and his concern was that they're building it too close to the ocean. And he told the family at that time, one day, if they keep doing this, Waikiki will choke on its own sewage. In 2006, a difficult decision had to be made by a good friend of ours, at that time the mayor of Honolulu, Mufi Hanneman. 43 million gallons of raw sewage had to be dumped into the Aloha. And the minute I heard that story, I happened to be on the mainland at the time, it immediately took me back to what my great-grandfather was concerned about, right? The reason I'm telling you this story is my great-grandfather would have loved serving on the steering committee of the Oahu DMAP. Okay? And the reason I want to make this point important is that the people in these communities, whether it's Waikiki, whether it's Kohala, whether it's Molokai, they know their place. They know their Aina. They know their mo'olelo, their stories. And all of it contains intelligence. All of it contains information that can be tapped, okay? And so the fact that we're taking that step right now, at this time in Hawaii's history, I think is transformative into itself. Let me give you another story before we adjourn, and it has to do with Waipio Valley, right? One of the true iconic centers of high significance historically and culturally, and really one of the kalo centers that we have in our state. So I happened to be working on helping the taro farmers with their leases about 28 years ago. I was in there with a team, and each week, each month we'd go in. I'm very clear about the fact that I am a foreigner. I am a visitor. I may trace my family genealogy back to Waipio, but I don't live there, right? I'm not. And so I go in, and I start, you go in, you got your ears open, your heart open, and people are eager to teach you if you come with the right attitude, right? So this young woman says to me, young man, says to me, hey, John, you know that Waipio means the arching water, the curving water. You see that waterfall? That's Waipio. It's this arching of the water, fresh water into the valley. Oh, okay. I said, that's great. A couple weeks later, I come, I'm standing on this promontory, and this young woman says to me, hey, John, you see the stream, the waterfall? You see the stream, how it moves through the floor of the valley and curves? That's Waipio. That's the curving water. Okay. So you keep learning, right? I come back a couple months later, and I'm with a Hawaiian kupuna who says to me, hey, John, you see how the waterfall and the stream enters the ocean, the water evaporates, clouds, rain, waterfall. That circular motion, the life cycle of water, that is Waipio. Okay. And the reason I shared this story is we're embarking upon a very important time. You heard earlier that incredible legislative update that took place today at 2 o'clock, right? So we know that we're at a juncture, okay? We're not going back. There's going to be change moving forward. And what's going to be important about that change is that we do it together and collaboratively to assist the legislative vision, the executive branch vision of where this industry should go. But what's important about this story is we're going to have to get past the obvious. Those two young ones who talked about the waterfall and the stream were talking to me about the obvious. What's not obvious is what the kupuna was saying. Because the kupuna was able to make visible for me the invisible. Because she had an understanding of the system and the complexity of that system and the simplicity of it and the grace of that system. And as we move forward, it's going to be so important because the market is going to demand increasingly more meaningful experiences, more authentic experiences. The good news is there's only a couple places you can get authentic experiences: the community and the culture will provide it, whether it's Hawaiian culture or the multi-ethnic cultures that have made Hawaii home over time. This is going to be important. That Hawaiian kupuna who taught me that is Dr. Pua Kanahele. Earlier today, you learned about the fact that her mother is commemorated on one of the U.S. quarters, Auntie Edith Kanakaole. This is Auntie Edith's daughter. And I'll leave you with a thought that she shared with me as well on two different occasions, first in 2001, and again when I was going through the application process here at HTA. Koho'ia. Koho'ia has to do with a decision-making process that on the surface, at times it appears we have decisions to make. But as you get deeper in certain circumstances, the decision has already been made because the kuleana has selected you. The responsibility has selected you. As I say that, many of you in this room can internalize that because you feel called to what it is you're doing. And make no mistake, I feel called to what I'm doing. And let me end with this. It was about a month between being selected as the HTA president back in summer of 2020. There was about a month before that selection and reporting to work. And I experienced something highly unusual. It was like, I never had so many people say, John, I'm praying for you. Or my wife and I are praying for you. Or my family, we're praying for you, right? And back then in 2020, I understood what they were saying. People, like, this would happen in baggage claim, right? I'd stand there, people I didn't know would come up. And it was the frequency with which it was happening. But then I came to appreciate the fact that in the summer of 2020, 3, 4, 5 months into the pandemic, there was a real high level of anxiety and uncertainty. And I received that blessing from them really as their concern for Hawaii and its future, right? And we had gone from a record year in 2019 in terms of tourism taxes and visitor spending, visitor arrivals, and here we were in July, and arrivals were hovering around 0, right? So that was really kind of an interesting experience. In the last month, 5 weeks, I'm beginning to hear it again, right? Okay. And it's because people are watching this play out in the media, and they're trying to understand it, and we have a position, and the Senate has a position, the House, and so it's not easy to understand it in a comprehensive way, right? And so more people are saying, and again, I think it's important that first you receive that appropriately and humbly, but again, it has more to do with people's concern about the health and well-being of Hawaii going forward. Okay, because on the deeper level, we have evolved an economic model that, not by intention or by design, is dismissing our people. The affordability is becoming more difficult to accommodate here, right, for various reasons. And so we've got a ways to go. And so we all have power, right? You have power. I have power. HTA has power. The legislature has power. Everybody's got power. But in order for us to transform Hawaii in a way that it is destined to, we all need to get better at tapping our mana. Because the mana is the source of creativity. The mana is the source of compassion. The mana is the source of intelligence. And we just need to become better at doing that. And so I'm going to end this today with a interpretation of a chant called Na'aumakua. Na'aumakua can trace its origins back to 1795 in Keoho Kona. A young boy was born named David Malo, among the highest respected scholars. And at the time in 1795 in Kona, he would have been surrounded by all of the teachers that encircled Kamehameha the Great. Okay? And Na'aumakua is a recognition not to only Hawaiian ancestors, but to the ancestry in this room that comes from the four corners of the planet, right? It's your ancestors. It's your 7 generations. It's your great-grandparents. It's your great-grandchildren, okay? So I'm going to ask you to stand as we conclude with this. This is the Hawaiian chant. I will read the English, and we will use this as our final offering of today before we adjourn. Na'aumakua, a call to the ancestral guardians. Ancestors from the rising to the setting sun, from the zenith to the horizon. Ancestors who stand at our back and front. You who stand at our right hand, a breathing in the heavens, an utterance in the heavens, a clear, ringing voice in the heavens, a voice reverberating in the heavens. Here today are your descendants, the children of island Earth. Safeguard us, that we may flourish in the heavens, that we may flourish on earth, that we may flourish in the islands. E homai ka ike, grant us knowledge. E homai ka ikaika, grant us strength. E homai ke akamai, grant us intelligence. E homai ka maupopo pono, grant us understanding. E homai ka ike papalua, grant us insight. E homai ka mana, grant us power. Amamawa noa, this prayer is now lifted and is free to take flight. Thank you.